Wednesday, everyone. I am Joe Marcello, joined as always by my partners in comic book crime, Orrin Phillips.
Hey, everybody.
And Mike Farah.
Good evening.
This is the Dollar Bin Bandits podcast, and today we are bringing you a whole lot of awesome. We're bringing you the man who is responsible for our childhood in many ways, who spawned comic books, toy lines, TV, movie. I mean, look, this man worked on it all. He worked on none other than the Transformers. And when I say worked on it, he basically created the names of all these characters in one weekend. We're talking to none other than Bob Budiansky.
Yeah, and that's an amazing story unto itself. And for me, finding out personally that he was the driving force behind the Marvel trading cards, which growing up, I still have my set here. I show them to my kids. I cherish them. I was just like, whoa, you're probably the coolest guy I've ever spoken to.
Totally a jack of all trades. Cards, comics. Those power rankings on the back of the Transformers packages from the original. He showed us his original basically spreadsheet on paper, not on Excel or anything, where he was ranking everybody's different power sets. And then basically, like Joe said, I mean, he came up with the personalities of the Transformers in like a weekend. And then that became, the shows, that became the comics, the movies. It's just an incredible story. So let's get to it. This is Bob Budiansky.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Now, before we barrage you with Transformers stuff, and Orrin, basically laid down the law for us on that, we will get all the other questions out of the way first. First and foremost, though, how did you get started in the industry?
Well, I was always interested in drawing comic books from a very early age. And so I was drawing my own little comics at home for years and years, through elementary school or junior high school and so on. And then when I got to high school, I thought, this is not a practical career to think about, becoming a comic book artist. I'm going to become a civil engineer. So I got a degree in civil engineering, which is, of course, the very first step in becoming a comic book artist, as you probably know. No, not really. But anyway, all the time I was a civil engineering major, I also worked for the college newspaper as an artist. And eventually I became the graphic arts editor. So the newspaper came out 3 times a week. I'd have a lot of different illustrations. And, I got a little better, and I certainly had an aptitude for it and an interest in it. And eventually, when I graduated, the arts editor, which is basically the department that does the movie review, the arts editor, Jay Boyar, he graduated also, and he got an entry-level job at Marvel Comics. He knew of my interest in drawing comics, so he invited me down to visit him during, I stayed for another year for grad school. So he invited me down to New York City to visit him during the holidays and show my artwork to one of the art directors there. And the art director, who at the time was Marie Severin, fabulous artist, fabulous person. She looked at my work and very, very gently said, "You should find another career." So anyway, that was like the holidays around 1975. So fast forward about 5 or 6 months, Jay had quit his job and take another job, something that was more up his alley. He didn't want to stay in comic books. He wanted to become a movie reviewer, which he eventually did. And anyway, he said, "Why don't you interview to replace me as editorial assistant in the Marvel British department?" And so while I was still at college, which was up in Buffalo, New York, I got on the phone with my future boss, Larry Lieber, who you probably know is, a legend and Stan's brother. And I got on the phone with him for about a half hour, and I had Jay Boyar and a couple other guys I had met down there, vouching for me. And after a half-hour phone call, I got the job. So I dropped out of grad school. It was the end of the semester anyway, so it was good timing. I dropped out of grad school, and that was on a Wednesday. And the following Monday, I started working as editorial assistant in the Marvel British department. Oh, and also Jay warned me, don't tell Larry that you want to become an artist. He says, if you tell him you want to become an artist, he won't hire you because he doesn't want somebody that's going to quit on him. So I did not mention it during the interview, but as soon as I got there, I made it clear I wanted to become an artist. And Larry was very helpful, and I got a lot of sketch work to do, like doing sketches for other artists to do finished artwork from. And the art director for the British department was Marie Severin. And she could not have been a better teacher and more generous with her advice and her time in helping me become a professional artist. She was terrific to work with. And I'm sure she had no memory whatsoever that, 5 or 6 months earlier, she had basically told me to take a hike. Because I'm sure all the time people like myself came up and was introduced to her and showed their samples, and she had to figure out ways to tell them, try something else, you're not going to make it here. So I was just another one in that parade at that time. But anyway, that's how I got my start.
And over time, you did start to do pencil. You got to pencil Ghost Rider.
Yes.
What were your thoughts on the book before you got into it? Did you like the artistic direction of it, or were you sort of on the fence?
Well, I wasn't really a Ghost Rider fan. I mean, let me pull back just for a moment. So my interest in Marvel comics at that time, when I was a kid, I read lots of comic books. I started out with DC Comics, and I moved over to Marvel, and I read all the mainstream Marvel comics, like Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were my favorites, and some Daredevil, and that was pretty much for my Marvel collecting. But then by the time I got to high school, I dropped comics completely. And it wasn't until I got to college that a friend of mine, also in the civil engineering department, who was also a good artist, introduced me to some comic books I was completely unaware of. And the one that really astounded me, that I was just kind of floored because it was unlike anything I had experienced when I was collecting, 5 years previously, was Conan the Barbarian. I had never seen anything like it in comic books. And I loved it. And the artwork was wonderful, and the stories were great. And I just really got into it. So when I came to Marvel, it wasn't like I was reading all the Marvel, superhero books or horror books or whatever. I was into Conan, and I got into Warlock, Jim Starlin's Warlock, and so on. And so I wasn't like collecting everything. So I got to Marvel. I knew of Ghost Rider, but I wasn't really reading Ghost Rider. So yeah, I wasn't paying that much attention to it. So what happened with me was I became the Ghost Rider cover artist long before I became the interior artist, which is a really odd thing. Usually, especially for a young artist, you don't get to do the covers of a book that you're not drawing. But I did. So I didn't really dwell on so much what was inside the book. I was just happy to get the cover assignments for a couple of years before I got the interiors.
And were you allowed, when you did start to get the interiors, to put your own spin on what the character looked like, or did you sort of have to stick with how it's been done in previous issues?
I think I was encouraged to when I took over the book as the interior artist, it was given a soft reboot. I don't know if you realize that, but with issue, I think 68, we redid the origin. I mean, it wasn't like a completely new origin. We just retold it. So it was, like I said, it was a soft reboot. It was like, in case you haven't been following Ghost Rider the last few years, here's what you need to know. Starting with this issue, we have a new writer, new artist, new look. So nobody told me to like copy what was done before. And in fact, because I was the cover artist for a couple of years, I had already kind of established a look anyway, so I was able to cut. And Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief at the time, he actually went to one of our colorists on staff who was into model making, and had him hired him to build me a model of a Harley Chopper, so I could have a model, that this is his new bike, this is his new motorbike, this is the look we want. So I was given start a new direction, refresh the character. I still have that model somewhere, or pieces of it anyway.
That's pretty. How important was it to you as an artist to get that soft reboot, to be like, okay, clean slate, this is where we're going to go and going forward?
Oh, it's great. It's liberating. You don't have to worry about I mean, I certainly referred to, especially since it was retelling the origin story, I certainly referred to relevant issues, like the first issue, the one that I guess Mike Plug originally did. So I was looking at what he had. I'm going to turn off something here. I was looking at what he had done before as reference, and his work was wonderful.
And when it got rebooted again in the late 80s, early 90s, and then I think Mark Teixeira starts taking over it, and it has a whole different look. Did you like?
It was a different character too.
Right. Did you like that more demonic vibe?
It's a different direction, you know. I mean, Mark's a terrific artist, so I don't want to say I did it one way and he did it the other way, and one's better than the other. Is like, you know, he has a new character, new writer. This is what they're going for. It looked great. I thought he did a wonderful job. He and Javier Saltaris. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were tremendous on that book. Excuse me, my dog is interrupting me again. I have to let her out.
That's quite right.
She likes to crash these podcasts. So I'm trying to train her to not do that. But that's the way she is.
That's why we don't do a lot of these live.
Okay. That's the problem when you set up your computer by the kitchen back door. So you have to deal with this. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry about that.
And the other thing I wanted to ask about was, and it was something my buddy told me about a couple of years ago, and I just sort of got fascinated with it, was Quest Probe.
Yes.
So you're part of it, you're editing the books, and the idea is, here's a video game, a computer video game, that's made a deal with Marvel, and we're going to try to combine them into the books and create, you know, a little story to get folks into the game and reading the comics as well. When you hear the idea, did you think it's something that could work pretty well, or were you sort of on the fence about it?
Well, first of all, you explained that very well. Thank you. I appreciate it. You can keep going if you would like. But anyway, I was special projects editor starting around 1986. So what that meant was that at that time, Marvel was being like inundated with all sorts of outside companies coming to us and saying, we want to partner with you. We want you to develop this product into a comic book, you know, mainly to help sell their product, not to help sell comic books, but, you know, the collateral effect is that we can hopefully sell comic books like we did with G.I. Joe and Transformers and Star Wars and so many other properties that Marvel licensed in that era. So this was just another one of those. So I don't remember all the specifics about it, but we just try to do our best with, you know, here's what we're given, make a story out of it, make it appealing to an audience. And if the computer software had taken off, the games that were connected to Quest Probe had taken off, the comic book would have, you know, done tremendous. But I don't think the computer software ever became a huge hit. Right. But it was a very early experiment in using superheroes in computer games, I believe. So
were you surprised that after 3 issues they either ran out of money or something happened and you just sort of had to do a cold stop?
Having worked on a lot of different special projects of this nature where we were partnering with some outside company to promote their product, none of that surprised me, because a lot of them just, you know, hit a wall for all sorts of reasons. They just never went anywhere, and then others took off.
How tough is it for you though to try to do something creatively with the comics and with this outside company that meets their needs? Okay.
She has to come back in. Sorry about that. All right. I don't know. She barked and then she disappeared into the darkness. She'll come back. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Now, I'm just saying, how difficult is it to come up with something that meets a comic book's needs, meets this other company's needs, and is entertaining at the same time?
It's you know, it's what I did for a living, and I also worked with a lot of talented people. I didn't do it all by myself. So, did you hear that?
Yeah,
I did. Yeah.
Get in here.
Oh.
Okay, that'll be the only time every time she goes for a walk, she wants to go outside again. So, she got it out of her system. She should be okay now. Anyway, what was I saying? What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, putting together something, the comic books and an outside company and make it entertaining. Because
I had a track record of doing that. I worked on Transformers, I worked on Visionaries, I worked on Air Raiders, I worked on NFL Super Pro. That was my job as special projects editor. Some of them worked better than others. Some of the ideas that we were handed, I thought were just, outright ridiculous. How are we going to make this look? How are we going to take this Sal's ear and make it into a silk purse or whatever? It's like, but you do the best you can with what you're given. So I don't remember the very specifics about Quest Pro. I'm sure it had at least some people who thought it was the most wonderful thing they ever saw, and then there are other people who looked at it and say, big deal, who cares? So, but we did what we could. I took everything very seriously. That's why I was chosen to do this particular job. And we had, I don't know if I was a baseball player, maybe we had like a 300 average or 400 average. I mean, some things work better than others, But Marvel was willing to try, and sometimes Marvel at that time would generate the idea and go out and try to find somebody to develop it for another medium, like TV or game or whatever. So it worked both ways.
So, along the same lines, our podcast kind of has a morbid curiosity with NFL Super Pro.
Okay.
And we ask anybody who's even tangentially involved with that comic book about its creation and basically its impact or lack of impact on comics going forward. But could you tell us a little bit more about how that came about and what it was like sort of wrangling the talent into place? We heard from Fabian, for instance, that the artist had no idea anything about football, the American football,
Right.
If that's the case, and that Fabian was sort of negotiating back and forth how many issues he would do, and sort of it was kind of a hot potato, if you will, of trying to get
Fabian's from Argentina. How much does he know about America?
Yeah, I think he'd probably admit that as well. So just curious, your experience having at the editor or editorial level, who brought you into the project, and then how did you figure out how to, make that work or try to make that work with, the tools that you're at your disposal?
So I'm just going to back up to something you said a little earlier, which is how that come about. So you have to understand that all these deals with these outside companies are not generated with an editorial. They're generated at a upper management level from our, the publisher at the time or somebody else in the company making these deals. And then eventually they trickle down to editorial, because we're the ones that have to produce the comic books. So I don't know how the deal came about, but I'm sure whoever made the deal at Marvel was very excited at the prospect of doing anything with the National Football League. And I have to say, honestly, I thought the whole idea was ridiculous to take a guy. I mean, on one level, all comic book superhero characters are ridiculous. They're these people, these men and women running around in these colorful, silly costumes, right? Mm-hmm. But here you're taking somebody who's already in a costume, in a football helmet with pads, and then you're saying, oh, in addition, he's a superhero. It just, there were too many suspensions of disbelief for even me, who grew up with comic books. So I don't remember, why this person worked on the book so much, or why the characters are developed in this particular way. But we developed him as best as we could, given that limitation that he has to be a football player and he has to run around in a football uniform. And we did what we could with it. I will say that the best thing that came out of it was I got Super Bowl tickets. So
that's pretty damn good.
There you go.
That would work. Yes.
Yeah.
Any stories left on the shelf for a Super Pro revival?
I don't know. I've often gotten asked, but not about NFL Super Pro specifically, about other books I worked on. Like, did you have any stories that you wanted to tell that you never got around to telling? Or, if I did, I forgot about them, 30 years ago when I stopped working on the book. I don't sit around dwelling on, I still want to do that story from '89 or something. It's just
So we won't be seeing Super Pro and the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness in any way.
Could. I don't know. I think Marvel.
That would be the ultimate Easter egg.
Marvel would have to work out a licensing agreement with the National Football League since they own the character.
They're printing money. They could do
it. And also, they have the perfect vehicle and also the perfect transition to What If.
Right.
What If Super Pro.
You know, Mike, thank you for bringing that up.
Still Super Proing. You're welcome, Joe.
I just watched the Marvel Zombie episode last night.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So you had a chance to work on What If number 34.
Yes, that was my first full comic book that I drew.
When you're presented with a What If, what goes through your mind?
Well, at that time, what went through my mind was Marvel finally gave me an entire book to illustrate. That's all that I was thinking. Like, this is the first time. I mean, up until then, I was getting these like little mini assignments, or like doing a splash page for a British comic book reprint, or I don't know, all sorts of odds and ends. So at this point, Marvel trusted me to do a full-length comic book. So I didn't really care that it was a what if story. I was just excited to have the opportunity, and that comic book led to me getting Ghost Rider eventually.
Okay.
So it was a stepping stone. That's all.
Okay.
So I didn't really, I wasn't like, oh, they didn't give me Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man to draw on a monthly basis. They're only giving me What If, which doesn't count, but it's only a what if story. I was just really excited for the opportunity.
Yeah, you make the comment you just made, it doesn't count. I think, it's really, certainly nowadays, everything counts in one way or another, and they quite frankly have been able to do that. Even things that have been what ifs or Elseworlds in DC's case, they're all part of continuity now. So, to say that it was, it didn't count at one point, I think at some point or another, it will come back around and it will be part of continuity. So,
I wasn't making a statement that it didn't count. I was saying,
no, I get you.
I could have looked at it that way, but all I looked at it was like, this is a great opportunity for me.
Yes, no, I completely understand where you're coming from on that, but I just, a lot of people take that stance when it comes to those types of storylines, but I think they're fascinating. I mean, the one you did was great, and they're all fun, and they're what they're supposed to be. Like, let's take the characters you love and turn them on their head, and do whatever we want with them. How do you think? What do you think? You mentioned you saw the zombie episode. How do you think Marvel's doing with those episodes currently?
I think they're uneven. I think some episodes work better than others.
Yeah.
So, I actually like the zombie episode.
Oh, I thought the zombie one was great.
Yeah,
they're really fun. In that same vein, is there any characters that you would like to have really sunk your teeth into in that sense? Maybe as pertains to a what if type issue, or maybe, any other storyline for that matter?
Well, I guess at Marvel, I would have always loved to have risen to the level of drawing Spider-Man on a regular basis. But I took myself out of the running from that by becoming a full-time editor at Marvel. After Ghost Rider ended, I did a few more issues of some other books freelance, and then Jim Shooter offered me a full editorship, so I took that instead. So it's a choice I made. But and I did draw a little bit of Spider-Man here and there, but not much. It's like a cover here, a couple of covers. If I had risen to that level where I would be like the hot flavor of the month for Spider-Man,
Got it.
Really happy, but I never allowed myself the opportunity, really. So that's fine. I made other choices.
So, a couple more questions before we take our big Transformers dive. One is, you just alluded to, what was sort of the majority, I would expect, of your career, or at least a certain significant chunk, which is your editorial work. I'm curious if there are particular moments, issues, storylines that jump out as being, ones that are highlights for you during your editorial run.
Well, so my editorial career was not like most editors, which is originally I was hired to be what one might call a mainstream editor. So among my first few books that I was given on a regular basis to edit included Fantastic Four. Can't get more mainstream than that. Daredevil, Marvel 2 and The Thing. I'm not sure if I got Marvel 2 and 1, which evolved into The Thing. So, but within a year or so, again, Jim Shooter, because of other work I was doing with Jim, specifically on Transformers, he decided he wanted a special projects editor and asked if I would take that job. And I was really happy to take it. I mean, I like the mainstream books, but I like the idea of being able to create new stuff that wasn't like didn't have its feet in concrete of Marvel continuity. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to worry about all that stuff. I could just make up new stuff and do whatever I feel like. So it was a real act of freedom to take that position when it was offered to me, and I liked it. So when you say like which books, you know, like I would say like the projects that I really cared about the most when I was special projects editor was becoming the editorial overseer of the Marvel trading cards. Starting in 1990, I was in charge of 11 sets of cards over a 5-year period. That was great. What else? Initially working on Transformers as an editor before I became the writer. There was a lot of headaches involved with that, but I still liked working on it. Working on the Marvel retail poster program. So for many years, I was in charge of all the posters that were for sale at the comic book shops. I was the one who was coming up with the ideas and working with the artists and working on designs for those posters. So a lot of things that were behind the scenes that don't have my name on it, but I was heavily involved with, that were, you know, very stimulating as an editor to be part of. The books that I edited prior to me jumping ship and becoming special projects editor, I worked with John Byrne on Fantastic Four. It was okay. I worked the Daredevils I worked on are nothing historic or memorable, other than the fact that I hired David Mazzucchelli to be the regular Daredevil artist. You know, prior to him working with Frank Miller. So I didn't get in on that, but I did hire David, and he was terrific to work with. He was a phenomenal artist. So those are among some of the more memorable, happier projects I worked on.
I have to sort of go on a slight tangent because you mentioned the trading cards. I'm wondering about the X-Men set with Jim Lee, or did he do the entire universe? He did the X-Men set. He did the X-Men set, right? Did he offer to do that? Because I know he's spoken in the past about this being sort of a humongously stressful job. Did he offer to do that, or were you saying we're looking for an X-Men set for one artist to do the entire character run?
Well, the way it came about was we meaning Marvel and Impel, which was the trading card company at the time. Marvel and Impel had such enormous success the first 2 years with the first Marvel Universe set in 1990 and then the second one in 1991, that in 1991, we made plans with Impel to expand to 3 sets a year. So in 1992, the agenda was we're going to do a character or team focused set, another Marvel Universe set, and a higher premium quality set, which became the Marvel Masterpieces by Joe Jusko.
Right.
So that was quite a year, 1992. So it was immediately decided, well, X-Men is the obvious choice. There was no book or line of books hotter in 1992 or 1991 when we were talking about this than X-Men. And there was no artist who was hotter than Jim Lee, who had just taken over as the regular artist in X-Men a few months earlier. So my inclination was to ask if Jim Lee wanted to do the entire set before I went to the usual path, which was to ask a whole bunch of different artists to do a few cards apiece, as we had done with the first 2 Marvel Universe sets. So and to be polite about it, Marvel editors didn't usually poach talent from other editors without talking to the other editor first. So I went to Bob Harris, who was the editor of the X-Men books, and I said, is it okay if I ask Jim? And he was very stressed. Bob Harris was very stressed out about it because he has to get a monthly book out. It's not an easy book to draw. It's not a one-character book, but he knew Jim was the right artist to do it. You know, he knew that he was the perfect person to do the X-Men at that point. So he said, okay. So I asked Jim, and Jim agreed. He was real excited to do it, and he was very stressed about it because he had to put together 100 cards, 104 cards actually. Illustrations were 104 out of 105 cards, not the checklist, and plus get out a monthly book. But he did it. He was able to do all of it. So he did it, and he did a phenomenal job.
The cards look great.
And by the way, there's a lot more I could tell you about that particular set, but my publisher won't allow me to speak about it yet.
Oh,
so hint. So anyway,
gotcha.
Talk about it off mic.
Yeah. No, I can't even talk about it off mic.
Sorry, Mike.
We'll just conjecture about it off mic.
But I will show you all of these books that my publisher sent me.
Oh, snap.
Ooh.
And you have to fill in the blanks after that. You know,
Okay.
More here, but you can't quote me on anything. I'm not going to say anything.
No, it's cool.
We'll read between the lines,
That's cool.
as it were.
That's a nice reading material.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so last thing, I know we just keep going, it's sort of teasing this out, but I did want to talk briefly about Sleepwalker, which was, I thought, a very interesting title and came out at a time when it seemed that Marvel, there he is.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Wow.
Somebody sent me this a couple years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, terrific.
Looks like a trophy. You won Sleepwalker. Came out at a time when it seemed like Marvel was putting some sort of push on actually putting together new characters, new solo characters like Sleepwalker and Darkhawk, and new teams like the New Warriors. Was there sort of this conscientious effort, and how did Sleepwalker then fit into that?
There was certainly an effort in the late 80s and early 90s. Marvel editorial was making a sincere effort to come up with new properties. We had just gone through the New Universe era, which came and went, and then the New Universe was kind of a pocket universe separate from the Marvel universe. And so when Tom DeFalco took over as editor-in-chief, he wanted to try to bring in some new ideas to Marvel in the form of new characters and so on. And so the word went out, and actually we formed a what was it called? New projects committee among like a few senior editors. I was actually in charge of it. And so we would get these ideas from different creators, and we would review them. And frankly, most of them didn't go anywhere. They just were not well fleshed out, or we had problems with them. And then at the same time, sometime during that period, I submitted the idea for Sleepwalker. Of course, I then recused myself from the committee. I could not judge my own character, but it went through that committee, and it got bumped upstairs to Tom DeFalco eventually, the editor-in-chief, and he reviewed it. And he asked for some changes, which I did to the treatment that I had written, and eventually got approved, along with, like you said, New Warriors and Darkhawk, and frankly, not too many ideas made it through that process. So anyway, I was quite flattered that my idea made it, and so for about almost 3 years, the book came out. But did you have other questions about it?
The only other thing I would ask is, because I think there was just recently the beginnings of a Darkhawk revival, if there was again, anything sort of on the shelf or that could be sort of conjured up for a Sleepwalker revival if they.
Well, I don't have anything on the
choose.
shelf. I know Marvel recently did a 4-issue Sleepwalker miniseries, I think, or something
Did they?
about Sleepwalker.
I might have missed it.
Yeah, like a couple of years ago, I think. Yeah, I don't have anything. I did a 1-page Sleepwalker for a special issue of the Marvel's 1000. What was it called? Marvel 1000, I think. 1000.
Marvel Comics.
There were 1-page stories in it, so I got a 1-page Sleepwalker story that I wrote and illustrated myself. So that was it for Sleepwalker. And I hear he pops up here and there in books, but I don't know of any plans on Marvel's behalf that they have to relaunch Sleepwalker. If they want to do it, they'll, I think I've made it clear. Hey, if you want to do it, remember to, here's my phone number, give me a call. But, so far they haven't gotten in touch with you. I don't know if you're aware that there's a Sleepwalker fan film that was made.
No.
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so it came out last year. It was supposed to premiere at a film festival in Tampa, Florida, live action. It was supposed to premiere on March 20th, 2020, which was 5 days after the lockdown began. So that got canceled. Eventually, it premiered in December. I think it was the same film festival, but it was virtual. I was going to fly down for the premiere. I was going to be on a panel discussion. So instead, I was on a Zoom panel discussion in December, and it's available on YouTube. It's almost a half hour long. It's like I said, it's live action. It uses real actors, real camera operators, real sound people, real wardrobe people. The person who put it together is a real videographer. He does like industrial video, so he has certain talents in this area, and he was able to round up a crew of people in the Tampa area and get them to donate their time over several years to do this. And it has special effects, and it has a real Sleepwalker. The poster is up there, but I don't want to rip it down from my wall. Let me see if it'll peel off very easily. Hold on. I'm getting it.
Okay.
If it's easier, I suppose you can try to move your computer or your camera.
I have a big desktop.
Okay.
Oops, hold on.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's a pretty cool poster.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real
That's
professional
cool.
job. And this is a real actor. I've seen him in movies, this guy. In the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So,
And how was it?
yeah, they did a pretty good job with it. Oh, and they also, a few years ago, they flew me down to Tampa to do a cameo. I did my Stan Lee cameo.
Nice.
I was the creator of Sleepwalker.
No, I
I'm
gotta
in
watch.
the movie too.
I just found the link online, so I can I'll circulate it around
Yeah.
and add it to our
I
show.
like it.
Put it on
And
the
he's
show
work-
notes.
I think
too.
he's working on episode 2 now. He wants to make it episodic.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
Ah, okay.
really good.
Yeah.
Cool.
The
Yeah,
other-
throw
the
some
other
viewers
day-
your way.
The other day he texted me, he says, I don't know how many of you all know or familiar with Sleepwalker, but there's a dog, Rick Sheridan, who's the human host of Sleepwalker, has a dog named Rambo. So he texted me, this guy, Josh Nuff, who's a guy, co-writer and director of the Sleepwalker movie. He texted me, he says, what kind of dog is Rambo? So I think he's casting Rambo for the next movie. I didn't have an answer for him. I said,
I was going to say, what kind of dog is it?
I said, I didn't
Dog.
design the dog. That was Brett Blevins, the artist. He came up with the dog. So
He's got 4 legs.
tell you.
Yeah,
Look for one that will actually work well with the cast.
Yeah, whatever.
It doesn't matter what breed.
Could be a little itty bitty chihuahua as long as he does what he wants.
Right. So,
All right,
anyway,
so
Sleepwalker's in the movies now.
okay, are we ready for our Transformers transition?
Do it.
I think we
We're
are.
crazy boys.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Orin's a GoBot guy, so he doesn't.
So I wanted to start this line of questioning because it's a little bit confusing to me, and hopefully you can shed some light on it. But there was the toys. There were, besides the toys, there was a show, and then there was a comic. And I'd love if you can take us a little bit through the chronology of those three expressions of the Transformers and how, to the best of your memory, they kind of influenced each other. Because I know your comic, for instance, named some of the characters, which presumably had to happen before they were named in the show or even on the toys. And then you also worked on parts of the descriptions of the toys. So basically, how did that all work chronologically? And did they all just kind of mush together in some way so that they all were affecting one another?
Well, I'll tell you what it looked like from my point of view, which was like, in the sub-level basement of everything, because I wasn't up there with management making these deals and so on. So the way it worked was Marvel had already established a relationship with Hasbro from developing G.I. Joe a couple of years earlier. So now Hasbro had another toy that it wanted to develop, and this is Transformers. And as you might know, Transformers originated as Japanese toys that were put out by Bandai and Takara. These mechanical toys that transformed from a robot form into some kind of other thing, like a vehicle, a plane, or a car, or in some cases an animal-like creature like a jaguar. All right. So all that Hasbro seemingly did was license these toys so that they could produce them and call them Transformers. I wasn't part of that deal, obviously, between Hasbro and those Japanese toy companies. But at some point, they came to Marvel. Marvel made a deal. Again, I had no idea of what went on through that phase of the development of all of this. But eventually, it trickled down to editorial. And Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief at the time, initially wrote the treatment for it as part of his day job. Didn't make an extra dime, but that original treatment that describes how the Transformers had this conflict going on between Autobots and Decepticons on this world of Cybertron, and came to Earth and continued their conflict. Jim came up with all that. I don't believe he came up with the names Autobots or Decepticons. I think that was given to him by Hasbro along with the word Transformers. But from there on, he came up with the original idea for the whole premise of the Transformers and what their world is like, Okay, so then he hired a senior editor at Marvel to develop the characters. Originally there were 26 characters. I think there were 12 Decepticons, and there were, what would that leave? 14 Autobots or something like that. Yeah, something like that. So that senior editor, apparently, again, I'm not involved, apparently he turned in his work. Jim didn't like it. And rather than go back to that guy who had a pretty good writing resume and, well regarded in many ways by comic book industry, he didn't want to go back to him and have him further develop the characters to his liking. So Jim then went down what we call editorial row, one office after another, desperately trying to find an editor with some writing background to develop these characters, because he was coming up against a deadline where he had to turn something into Hasbro. And so he went to Larry Hama, who developed G.I. Joe and became the G.I. Joe writer. And Larry turned him down, and he went to a couple other editors who had writing backgrounds, and they turned him down. And finally, out of sheer desperation, he came to me, and I had no writing background. I was known as an artist editor, not a writing editor. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And so over a long weekend, and I remember specifically when it was, because it was right before Thanksgiving of 1983. So like on Wednesday or Thursday of that week before, he gets a hold of me. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I needed to do it by the following Monday before Thanksgiving so that Jim could get it to Hasbro before Thanksgiving. So I developed all 26 characters. I wrote profiles for them. I named all of them, except for 2 names that were kept from the previous writer, one of them being Optimus Prime. So I did not name Optimus Prime, but all the others in that initial batch of 26, I came up with, all the other 24 out of 26, I came up with over that weekend. Turned it in, Jim liked it, sent it on to Hasbro, they liked it, and then for the next, so the spring of 1989, I stayed on with the book in one capacity or another. First as editor for the 4-issue miniseries, then as writer through issue 55 with a couple of books that I missed, a couple of issues I missed because of deadlines. So, and throughout that time, I continued to develop all the characters, or most of the characters that Hasbro kept coming up with. Like, here are new toys, we need names, we need profiles. So over that period of time, from late 1983 through the spring of '89, I named about 250 Transformers, and
Wow.
I wrote all the almost all the copy that you see on the toy boxes. I wrote during that period for those characters, and that was my connection to it. So when I would turn in these profiles, Hasbro would read them, they would approve them, they would have their legal department check on the names that I was recommending, because not every name was able to get through for legal reasons or whatever. But most everything got through. And then once everything was approved, Hasbro would then share that information with Sunbow Productions. Sunbow produced the animated TV show.
Mm-hmm.
What Sunbow did with it, I have no clue. But that's why you see some of the same material as far as characters and their powers, perhaps, appearing in the animated show that you saw in the comic book. So it really originated with me, and then from there on, it went out to the masses, to all the various various tentacles that Hasbro had, and stretching out in different directions. And what they did with it, I don't really know. It wasn't my issue anymore. I just had to worry about coming up with new names, new profiles, and writing a comic book.
So we're amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
sort of sitting here.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm like, wow. If my mother were hearing this, she'd be like, "You're the one to blame for him asking to buy all these toys."
I helped take money out of your family pocket.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it didn't come to me. I didn't make a penny from that.
It's one of my questions. If you,
I don't have any license. I don't have any royalty deal, unfortunately, with Hasbro. I did get paid for my work, but it was a flat payment, and that was the end of it.
So
I did get this cool award. So I did get this.
Oh wow.
Yeah, you're in the was it like
Transformers Hall of Fame.
Transformers Hall of Fame. That's cool.
Inaugural class. It only lasted, I think, 2 years.
Oh, well, you're in there.
You're in it.
So you get
almost the only one in it.
No. The first year was
Peter Cullen.
It was Peter Cullen and the two Japanese primary toy designers. I don't remember their names.
Okay.
And me.
I'll give it to them.
And then the next year,
Frank Welker, I think
Steven Spielberg might have been included in it, because he was the executive producer of the movie. So I like to think, I beat out Steven Spielberg.
That's pretty cool. How many people could say that?
Yeah, right.
So you get to this point where Transformers takes off in many ways. Do you know if was the TV show influencing the comic, or was the comic influencing the TV show at this point?
Well, I can say with 100% certainty that the TV show never influenced the comic book, because I never watched it.
Okay.
So I know the first year the TV show was kind of Earth-based, like the comic book mostly was.
Right.
And then I think in the second year they went in a completely different direction. And Hasbro came to me and said, "Do you want to follow what the TV show's doing?" And I said, "If I don't have to, I'd rather not." And they said, "Okay, you can continue doing what you're doing."
So basically, what I want to know is, who the hell decided to kill Optimus Prime?
In the comic book?
No, I'm just in the movie. That was a big deal when we were kids.
The movie. I had nothing to do with the movie.
No, I figured. But
I killed him off for a while in the comic book too. It's just
he's been killed a few times.
Like one of those things you got to do.
I remember reading a few articles, where obviously people of our age, that was a big deal. E.T. leaving and then Optimus Prime dying. We got pretty choked up, and but I remember throughout the years in the comic, he died a few times, and of course it's comics, so he comes back.
Yeah. By the way, my nephew proudly brags about the fact that he killed Optimus Prime in the comic book, because the character who killed, he dies in a video as a result of a video game in the comic book, and there's a human character who's kind of controlling the video game. His name is Ethan Zachary. So my nephew, Ethan Zachary Budiansky, is very proud of that fact, that he's the one who did in Optimus Prime.
That's a resume builder.
That is. What have you done with yourself? Well, I killed Optimus Prime.
I got away with it. Too.
Who the hell is that?
So let me just go back for a second and clarify that because it's amazing to me that your work, like that weekend, preceded the actual toys coming out to market.
Oh,
Is
they had
that
to
correct?
name them. They couldn't come out with no names on them, right?
Right.
They needed somebody to name them. Yeah.
So you and Marvel, to a certain degree, did more for establishing the Transformers universe than Hasbro did itself, it seems.
Oh yeah. Oh, I would say Marvel, and I'm not saying just me. I mean, obviously Jim Shooter had a lot.
Sure.
Jim Shooter is really the unsung portion of. A lot of people know that I have a lot to do with Transformers, but Jim Shooter's role is so behind the scenes. As I heard him say once, he just did it as part of his day job. He wrote this treatment, which everything is based from.
It's
And
amazing.
So Jim Shooter and myself, and mostly Jim Shooter, frankly, yeah, 98% of the Transformers world was built on what we developed back then in the 80s. Yeah.
And did you get a cameo in the movies?
No, they don't get anything in the movies. You know.
Were you in?
I guess my biggest burn, I think, about the movies is like Bumblebee. The Bumblebee movie came out. I named Bumblebee. I don't get mentioned in a credit or anything.
Oh, yeah.
That's some.
They never
Sorry to
talked
say,
me about it.
that's some bullshit.
Yeah, no, that's showbiz.
And that was the best one.
That really was.
Yeah.
It really
It
was.
a decent movie, yeah.
It was so good that that's the direction that they're going in for the sequel.
Yeah. So there you go.
You know.
Joe, did you have?
I'm gathering my thoughts. So, in terms of comics, now I know there've been a few incarnations of Transformers, and I've tried to keep up with as many of them as I can. But there comes a point when, you just can't. But not recently, but over the past few years, IDW brought back a fair amount of Transformers, storylines, or the Transformers license after Marvel. What brought you back to Transformers?
What do you think brought back? I mean,
Well,
I didn't really. All I did was like 15 years ago already. It's been a while. I did a movie adaptation for IDW. That was it.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right.
I didn't stick with it.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Wikipedia lied.
I wanted to talk a bit about the work you did on the actual toy boxes, or just coming back to the characters in general. So I remember, and I still have, them in the basement, probably a amount that my wife doesn't want to know. And I do remember these red sort of scanner types with the statistics. They were like these graphs on. Was that also part of what you did, or did you do sort of the prose description?
Power ratings for the Transformers. That was my idea. I didn't come up with the red cellophane. That was Hasbro's idea. They thought, oh, we'll make it more interactive. Kids will have to use this red cellophane to read the power ratings off the box. Yeah. Whatever. But basically, I was just copying what had already been established in the Marvel, what's called Marvel Universe Encyclopedia, Marvel Handbook the Handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Right.
And that former Marvel editor, the late Marvel editor, Mark Grunwald.
Yeah.
Which is, to assign power ratings to all the Marvel characters, so you could compare, is Hulk stronger than the Thing, and so on. And I just took that same idea, and I suggested it to Hasbro. And I actually, somewhere, I have a grid. Might be within arm's reach, in fact. Let me see. I have a grid on graph paper that I drew, showing all the power ratings and how they, how one character compared to another. And Hasbro liked it. They said, yeah, let's go for it. So they incorporated it into all the boxes. So, by the way, here's the original treatment right here from Jim Shooter. Okay.
Wow.
Transformers treatment. See it?
Wow.
That's the original. And
it's amazing.
Here, look, here it is.
Civil War rages on the planet
Here's my
of
original
Cybertron.
handwritten on graph paper ratings chart showing all the Transformers and
that's
their
awesome.
power ratings. So you can see I have strength. I'm trying to read it from the screen. Intelligence,
So you guys are
endurance, rank,
wow.
something with CA.
So awesome.
That's pretty cool.
So these are my original handwritten notes, and actually I had the wrong number of Decepticons. There were less than 12. That's that bottom section. Looks like about 8.
So you guys,
anyway,
how arbitrary? I mean, it can't be completely arbitrary, but like, how did you were doing it from whole cloth? So you just kind of
that was the fun part.
Decided as you were going.
That was the fun part. Oh, then Hasbro made a nice, neat version of it. See?
oh wow. So you guys are playing D&D with the Transformers, basically.
Yeah. I was playing D&D back then.
There you go. There explains the
First time I've admitted that in a podcast. So you have an exclusive.
There you go.
Well, like for instance, if you look at this more readable chart, like look down at near the bottom, it says Optimus Prime. So his strength is 10, and his endurance, his intelligence is 10. So like certain characters you can benchmark. Like, okay, if he's going to be here, then Bumblebee's going to be way down there. You know, and then kind of fill in other characters in between. But yeah, it was all very arbitrary overall. So it was fun to do.
I remember the same idea, I think, on at least one of the first sets of the Marvel cards too. Looking on the back.
And coincidentally, I worked on those as well.
Yes. That was the coolest part about them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we what the Marvel Universe 1 didn't have it, but Marvel Universe 2 had it. X-Men, the Jim Lee set had a version of it with using Cerebro. We used that idea over and over again. And the kids loved it, so it worked.
It was fun.
Fun. Yes, us kids.
That was the whole. I mean,
right.
I can't emphasize enough. That was the best part of working at Marvel, which is whatever I did, I tried to make it fun. You know, fun for me and fun for the people who would potentially want to buy these products. So, you know, whether it was Transformers or Marvel trading cards, the whole idea, especially with trading cards, make it fun. Make it like somebody picks that card up and gets real excited and wants to find out more about that particular character. And I think generally we did a good job, getting that across.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
and taking money out of Joe's wallet.
He's still taking money out of my wallet. And it's fine. So on a somewhat personal note, looking back on your career, what did you have the most fun doing?
Well, so I worked for Marvel for almost 20 years. So there were ups and downs, mostly ups. And even the downs were just downs relative to the higher ups, Mm-hmm. So I really enjoyed working on Ghost Rider, although that was really painful too, because I was a very slow artist. So it took a lot out of me just to draw one issue, but it was still great to be able to work on it. I really enjoyed working on Transformers as the writer more than anything else. However, I wrote almost 50 issues, and after the first 30 or so, I was really running on fumes after a while. I wanted to get off that book and move on to other things, and my editor kept begging me to stay on it because he had nobody else he could think of who could write it. Mm-hmm. So I stayed on it for probably a little longer than I should have, but I stayed on it and did what I could. But anyway, Transformers was a lot of fun, and then trading cards was a lot of fun. I just really enjoyed the whole process and working with a whole bunch of marvelous, no pun intended, marvelous artists, great artists. And we were able to work with an artist like Jim Lee for an entire set, artists like Mark Bagley for an entire set, Greg and Tim Hildebrandt for an entire set. Mm-hmm. One of my proudest moments is I gave Greg and Tim Hildebrandt a drawing lesson in how to draw Marvel Comics, and they listened, and to this day, like recently, Greg came out with some book, and he had me quoted in the he asked me for a quote for the book, some reprints of his artwork. I forget. And anyway, he noted in the book that I taught him how to, do the Marvel style of drawing, when I worked with it. And I was just like this punk kid telling these legends how to do something. So I was really happy to work with those guys. They were great. So I had a lot of more, wonderful experiences doing a lot of different kinds of projects.
One more Transformers question, and then I promise we'll start to wrap up. But
I could do this all night. I'm just
okay.
Great. Which movie is that from? Come on, Marvel Cast.
Captain
I
America.
could use all day, actually. I could use all day.
Captain America.
Right. There you
Yeah. Boom.
Good one.
Civil War.
Good one, Joe.
Thanks.
Civil War.
Good
Everything.
save.
Thanks. Good.
So you created all these characters again, kind of in a weekend, and you got to develop them in, the comic book. Were there ones that, stuck out in your mind as being sort of your favorites to write for? And do you think, as a secondary question, there were any that were sort of, you were surprised at became much larger characters in the show that you might not have thought were significant?
Okay, so I'm going to go to your second question first.
Okay.
In the show, I never watched the show. I have no clue
Oh, I'm
what
sorry.
happened in the show.
Yeah.
So I have no answer. But as far as my writing for characters, my favorite character to write was Blaster, because I wrote some of my best stories around the Blaster character. And whether he became a major character in the show or a big seller in the toys or popular, I don't know. I don't care. I was just trying to write stories. But some of my best stories concerned him. Now, the problem with writing the book overall was every time I developed some character or characters in what I thought were interesting ways, Hasbro, within a 6-month period, would come out with 20 new characters or 30 new characters. And then I was kind of encouraged, and when I say encouraged, I'm being polite, to introduce those characters into the comic book, which meant I had to squeeze out the other characters that I've been working with, which is why it was so frustrating after a while to continue writing that book. That's why, like I said, after 30 issues or so, I was ready to jump ship. It was just a real burden to figure out new ways to bring in all these characters and put aside all the continuity I developed with other characters and start all over again. It was a creative challenge. For a while, it was fun, but then after a while, it just became a grind. But anyway, so in answer to your question, Blaster was probably the character I enjoyed writing the most.
I like Blaster a lot too. I wouldn't say he was a significant part of the show, but I think he was one of the cooler ones. He was the boombox, right?
He was the good guy boombox.
Yeah, the good guy boom.
The counterpart to Soundwave, right?
Yeah. I dug him too.
Well, I'll just gush for a second because you guys don't talk Transformers. I just got to gush about the Marvel trading cards because Series 1 of my Marvel trading cards are kept in a very safe place in my house. Those cards did more for me to really love comics than anything I'd seen in a long time. So I have a special place. And when you talk about putting the stats on the back of Series 2 and Series 3 cards, my kids and I play a game where we pick teams using those cards, and they have to learn how to read the graph on the back to pick the most powerful team. So they think it's the coolest thing that, oh, look in the back, look, he's this strength, but he's not that smart, but he has the speed, and they have to, pick teams. So knowing that you put that on there, I just think that's the awesomest thing. So when we play now, I could drop knowledge to them, like, hey, I spoke to the guy who created this. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. So let me tell you one other thing. Okay, so this is the promo pack for the X-Men set. Yeah. Okay, 5 cards are in here. So, and here's the graph on the back for Cable. He's one of the 5 cards. So there are, if you ever got a hold of the promo pack and compared it to the regular cards, even though the artwork is identical, there are some differences in the back because these weren't finalized. They had to go out early. And so some of the differences include different graphs for the same character. But anyway, little side note. I just learned about that myself.
Yeah. Gee.
So these are the 5 promos. Cable, Wolverine, X-Men, Gold Team, Storm, and Magneto. So,
and then you had to put some cards together, and we get the them training in
the Danger Room cards. That was my idea too, by the way.
Really, that's his brilliant idea because they all fit into the back of a sheet of cards. Yeah. So the guy I worked with at Impel kept telling me, like, I knew nothing about the trading card industry other than the fact that when I was a little kid, I collected baseball cards for a little while. Not very long, but I went through that phase. And so when we got around to a special projects editor, I got the whole trading card idea dumped on me. I didn't know much about the card industry. So I was working with a guy named Ken Baroff at Impel. And after a couple of sets of Marvel Universe, he said, listen,
collectors collect these in these 9-pocket plastic sleeves that go into binders. You really need to, like, instead of having everything based around multiples of 10, like we'd have, you know, here's 40 heroes and here's 20 villains and so on. You got to make it around groups of 9. So for the X-Men cards, for the first time, I said, okay, cards 91 through 99 will be the Danger Room.
Yeah.
And 9 cards, each card featuring one character. And so Jim Lee designed this wonderful 9-card image. Well, it's one image that could be easily split up into 9 cards, with each ninth of the image featured one character prominently. And it was great. He did a tremendous job.
Oh yeah, that was a beautiful set.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still can sort of even when you showed me those, I was sort of conjuring up the rest of the characters and what they look like.
We're just very down memory lane here.
Yeah. That's what our podcast is about, basically.
There you go.
It's surprising that such an obscure character like Wolverine made it into the sample set, though.
Actually, if you look at that set, what's surprising is there are certain characters that we were told by the X-Men office at the time, this is going to be like the next big character. You know, it's brand new. You got to feature him in the set. And then they disappeared completely after the set. One of the reasons because a few of those characters were developed by Jim Lee or Will Sportasio, who then split to do Image Comics.
Yeah.
So once those guys were off the scene, nobody else picked up those characters and developed them any further.
Makes sense.
I think that happens. Well, maybe not so much anymore, but that happened more than we realize in terms of characters being introduced and then the creative team changing and sort of getting dropped or
right
left to follow.
So before we leave, we'd like to ask, is there anything that you would like to plug?
Oh, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I wish I had something to plug. I wish I could plug that book I was alluding to, but I can't talk about it yet.
You can just say I plug and then just blank and we'll fill it in.
Well, we'll
later.
fill it in. I'll do a voiceover. Like
no, the only thing I would say is I do private art commissions based on my comic book work, and so sometimes people want to get in touch with me. The best way to get in touch with me is just look me up on Facebook. I guarantee there's no other Bob Budiansky but me listed on Facebook, and you can send me a message, and I can add you to my ever-growing list of commission work that I'll never get to. So don't give up hope. There's always a chance I'll get to yours. I don't take money up front, so I'm not going to just take your money and forget about you. So anyway, you know, that's about it. That's all I really do. I don't work in the comic book industry anymore. I'm not writing stories for comics. I'm not drawing comics, but I do private commissions on occasion. That's it.
Welcome back, boys and girls. That was our interview with Bob Budiansky. I absolutely love talking to him. To hear about what went into the creation of one of our most beloved toys in comics was just absolutely amazing. And the whole time we were talking to him, I knew I'd seen his face someplace. It wasn't until afterwards that it clicked in my head that he was in the series, The Toys That Made Us on Netflix. And I was like, this guy looks familiar. Anyway. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah, we were sitting afterwards, and I remember we were all saying he should be like a millionaire 10 times over for everything he did for the Transformers franchise, which has exploded into pop culture, exploded into all parts of society, and it's a lot of it's because of the work he did. So I think all of us comic fans and Transformers fans and just owe him such a debt of thanks for all the work he did.
Yeah, and then on top of all that, 2 other things that we learned or that we knew and we got into was Sleepwalker, which is very cool to hear about the genesis of that character, and that there was, I think, he was part of a movie, an independent movie that recently came out, and then our old pal, one of our favorites, NFL Super Pro. He was one of the creative team, the editor. And anytime we get to talk NFL Super Pro, it's just so sweet. But that will do it for today. Keep on all our socials. We got more stuff coming up. Of course, we have another episode on Friday. So stay tuned, and we will talk to you later.